This is Chad Killian again. Just kind of providing any sort of help that I can here from the outside. It's obvious that a lot of people got a lot of things going on right now that are sort of moving people towards the online learning. I just wanted to add my 2 cents for anybody who might find value from it. This presentation is focused on designing useful online and physical education content during this rapid transition to online learning for us all. The purpose of this presentation is to briefly share some limited research evidence that might have some practical implications for what you're all doing right now. And then the main bulk of the presentation is to provide an overview of design considerations for online learning and physical education within the current context. Important to remember that online learning is different from face-to-face physical education. What you can do, how you interact with the students, assessment capabilities, access to equipment, time, is very different. Online learning during this unforeseen extended school closure is different than regular online physical education. So we need to be mindful of all the uniquenesses inherent in the current situation. Nevertheless, the purpose still aligns between all of this. We still have a unique and unified purpose for physical education. But I think the focus needs to shift a little bit given the current context. And so we need to adjust our design, our instruction, and the way we approach things accordingly. Something else to remember is that online learning, whether we want to or not, is a public display of your instructional process. And it also reveals the value of your content. People are going to see it, parents are going to see it, community members are going to see it, and they'll judge the value of your content. So we need to be very deliberate and very intentional about what we're putting out. And throwing resources against the learning management system and hoping something sticks is not going to be perceived as valuable by most people, including our students. So with these things in mind, I think this is sort of a foundational understanding that we need to have as we begin to develop our online learning. And I know it's a challenge because we were sort of caught off guard with this, but there are serious secondary outcomes related to perception, community perceptions, perceptions of our field that are inherent in everything that we do. So just be mindful of that as you design your content. Just some very brief evidence and some research that I've done with some colleagues from the University of Illinois and University of Michigan. And this is related to teachers adoption. We interviewed 20 high school teachers who use a supplemental online physical education curriculum. It was not during a global pandemic, so it's very different. But some of the takeaways I think might apply are underneath here in the key findings. Teachers did value the improvement that the online instruction provided to their programs, to their instructional capacities, and to their ability to include others. The health-related fitness knowledge that was inherent in the curriculum was an extension of what they were able to do in class. There, like I mentioned before, and like we're all aware, there's a bit of friction between wanting to provide a whole lot of movement versus wanting to provide robust instruction. And sometimes movement takes precedent. And so online instruction gave these teachers a real opportunity to provide instruction that they valued, that they knew was important, but didn't think that they had the time to implement into their face-to-face classes because they wanted students to be active. Um, the limited effort, the ease of use of this online instruction system for students and teachers was highly important to adoption. It was very easy to use. Quality support from the provider and the schools was a motivator to continue to use. So keep these things in mind, and we'll kind of unpack some of these practical implications here in a second. Also studied students' adoption and use of online physical education. We interviewed 37 students. Okay, so this is qualitative research. It's a small sample size, and it's sort of the beginning level of the research process to sort of find proof of concept. Is this even worth putting into physical education? So this is just initial findings that will inform continuous, larger scale research. But what can we take from this study? This was done by me and my doctoral advisor, Dr. Amy Woods. And the key findings were students did appreciate the ease of use of the system. It was easy to use and they appreciated that. Most of their engagement, however, was task oriented. Get it done and move on. They weren't really focused on learning because they didn't really prioritize physical education as being important in this context, which extended to them not really finding value in the online learning. However, there were some implementation issues with this, with some of the teachers involved in this study, and that influenced student buy-in. They sort of just provided the online instruction and were hands off the rest of the semester. And that had a negative impact on how students perceived why they were using it, how students perceived sort of how online learning jived with physical education. So what that means is the teacher's role is heavily important in getting student buy-in. And so it sort of unpacks some of these practical implications. Try to see value in what you're doing. Okay? The teachers that we interviewed found value in it. This might conflict heavily with your philosophy. You may never would even imagine using online PE because teachers matter, and they do. But online learning can provide very unique, um, augmented value to the instruction. You can provide extended instruction without sacrificing movement. You can reach students in a global pandemic. um, 30, 40 years ago, this would not be possible. It would be very, very much different situation. So there is value in what you're doing. You're able to reach your students using online learning. So that's a first step, and it's a practical implication. The ease of use was really important for students and teachers. So when you're deciding how you're going to implement all of this, choose something with a low learning curve, something that's a little bit intuitive to you, no matter how resistant you have been to technology. And make sure it's also going to be easy for students to navigate. One mistake I think a lot of people make is, oh, students grow up on technology, they know how to use it. Then the technology that they're using is game consoles and social media on the phone. Learning management systems and email even are bulky to a lot of the current students in K to 12, and so we need to be mindful of that as we decide what technologies we're going to use during this time. Support was also a big issue for the teachers. They felt very supported through the process of adopting the online system. So seek and advocate support. We've got an amazing Twitter community, but also your school district should be providing support. And you probably, I can imagine, perceive that the school is putting a lot of resources, a lot of support into the math, the English, the science teachers. You deserve support too, and so appropriately advocate for that in a way that um, you'll find helpful and the way that the school will be willing to provide. Show them that you have something valuable to provide, and hopefully that they will support you in that. One of the things that we saw was adding a lot of learning burden to what students perceive as a low value subject is a recipe for disengagement. We're all super passionate about what we do. Not all of our students are. So if we start adding a bunch of assignments, a bunch of requirements, a bunch of bulky videos to watch, not sure students are going to do it. And it's absolutely, absolutely, absolutely important to support students' transition to online learning, especially in physical education, to promote buy-in. There should be some module, some way that you connect with students to say, hey, this is weird for me too. I never thought I'd be teaching online. You never thought you'd be learning online, but let's do this together and let's get it done. And then continuously help them throughout so that it's not as weird as it might be if there wasn't that support. Um, and so if we're mindful of the socialization process, we can be in this together with everyone else. It's a new process for many of you, most of you. It's also new to students. And this being an unprecedented situation, resulting in an unprecedented response, you can kind of be on this journey together. Figure out with your students. We have a lot of stress because a lot of us are type A. We want to do a really good job. We're stressing out about this. If you can take a minute to breathe and realize that most of the PE teachers out there are new to this, almost all of the students are new to this, and we come alongside the students and say, hey, let's go on this together. You know, we're gonna be at home for a while. We're not really sure how this is going to turn out. 2 weeks from now, we might know a little bit more. But let's try together. Let's be healthy together. I mean, I don't work out at home. You don't work out much at home. We've got these awesome school facilities. We've got this awesome community. We got a lot of parks around us. We got streets. We got friends, neighbors. All we got to figure out a way to be physically active through all of this because it's going to benefit us. Um, it's going to keep our minds a little bit less stressed, a little bit less anxiety, little bit less depressed. And so you can show a lot of social support by coming alongside students, being mindful of that. As you're developing, be mindful of the shifting purpose. Okay, students in school context have a lot of built-in physical activity to get up and down in class, or to work on the smart board, the whiteboard, chalkboard, to sharpen a pencil, to go to the restroom, to switch between classes, to go to recess, to go to lunchroom, to go to the bus, to the parking lot. That's built-in physical activity. They might walk to school, skateboard, walk, or ride their bikes to school. At home, it's they wake up, Netflix, and go to bed, possibly. So standing is better than sitting and laying. It's not as good as being physically active, but we need to promote a reduction in sedentary behavior. We also need to promote enjoyable physical activity that can be integrated at home. There are different things. I put a lot of stuff out on Twitter about that. You can kind of look it up if I'm not being clear, because this is kind of stream of consciousness. So I'm just trying to put stuff out there, but sedentary behavior, we need to shift to say, hey, stand up and stand while you do your homework, or get up and walk up and down the stairs a couple times, or there's a lot of different ways. Eat your breakfast at your uh, pass-through window for the kitchen. I don't know what it's called. We have one here. Stand up and eat your cereal. Just get off your butt is better than nothing. We don't really know if students are going to engage in physical activity or not, but we can at least encourage them to not be sedentary. It's a dual sort of approach that we can take. If it's possible, provide sequential, engaging, and useful instruction. If you can come up with a couple modules, like what is sedentary behavior, what is physical activity, what are the benefits of physical activity, students can kind of see a sequence, it can build a little bit on it, and the physical activity challenges, the instruction that you're giving, some of the assessments that you do can be linked, rather than sort of a more chaotic approach of providing disconnected instructional modules. And then I think we can demonstrate the joy of integrated daily physical activity. Depending on how you choose to communicate with your students, this can be a real opportunity to connect and show them that you're active as well. And I'll touch a little bit more of that later. And so design principles, what are we thinking? These are broad. Again, there's not a whole lot of evidence related to effective online instruction and physical education from a design perspective, from an instruction perspective, etc. So a lot of this is going to need to be intuitive. The reflective process, as important as it is in your face-to-face classes, is going to be even more important during this time. And so just some of the broad design perspectives I would recommend is design with the context in mind. This is a highly stressful situation for a lot of people. It's different than physical education. And so we're not just going to be able to take a unit that we really wanted to do in class and just put it online and make students do it. That's not reality. And I would even argue that it's not appropriate. So be mindful of the context and design with your expectations in mind. What is your expectation? I would say we need to buffer our expectation a little bit because they're getting hammered with all sorts of requirements from all the subjects, all sorts of stress from home. Again, the parents and guardians their parents might be furloughed, they might lose their job, there might be financial stress, people might be getting sick. And so that creates a lot of uncertainty. And so our expectations in terms of accountability, in terms of engagement, really need to be tempered. Again, we care so much about physical education, but in this context, we need to buffer those expectations and really adjust our strategies to sort of align with what's going on. Design your instruction, design your approach with your technology readiness and proficiency in mind, and students. Try to make good decisions for yourself so you're not absolutely stressed 100% of the time. So choose a learning management system, choose a distribution, choose communication channels that fit with your readiness and the supports that you have in place. as well as students. Elementary online is even less researched, just because the developmental level students might not be quite as aligned to the autonomous, less structured learning environment than it might be for older learners. And even some high school students struggle with that. Even college students, I struggle with that. Like, I like being face to face, but there are ways to design instruction that fit with parental engagement in your community, the school support in your community, the learning expectations within your community. So be mindful of your students' level. Elementary is definitely different, even from a K-2 to 3 to 5 um, um, grade levels. So just be mindful of the developmental level. And that's no different from any other PE class that you're teaching. Um, and design with best practice principles in mind. I would strongly suggest keeping your videos shorter and longer. And these are videos that you might be curating. So your role might shift to more of a knowledge broker, so to speak, where you're kind of curating content and videos for students. Or you might choose to make some videos yourself. And I would challenge everybody to do that. Test out your technology proficiency. Try to record a video. It's good for students to see your face, hear your voice, and make that connection. So regardless, if you've got 20 minutes of content, that should be 4 videos, maybe even 5 videos. See if you can chunk that so that it's short, brief, engaging videos. And if you're doing it where they see your face, potentially that could be a point of connection. So whether you're curating videos or audio or reading, even should be short, should be brief, and should be high impact. So keep that in mind. How will you invite students into enjoyable physical activity engagement? Is a question we all need to ask. There's a difference between providing and requiring students to do something and inviting them in. And I think we need to be intentional with how we're implementing our instruction. There's a very easy way to make this just check off the box. What did you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? And I want to see it by Sunday. And then do it all again. It's like, is there a way that you can be creative? Is there a way that you can invite students into being active, invite them into making decisions that will help their mental health, that will help them connect with family members, that will help them um, at least uh, perhaps even adopt new habits? Extended period of time at home, there's a lot of room for growth, and physical activity behavior can be one of them. So be very intentional about how you're communicating with students, how you're structuring your assignments, um, and so forth. And one of the things that you can do is promote family, promote engagement with each other. My wife and daughter and I were out today and like on the trail in Atlanta and keeping social distance, but it was unbelievable how many families were out. I think that was, first of all, really cool to see. Usually the trails are pretty empty, but people are sort of, I don't know if it's like sober minded about this. We were very uncertain, and for good reason. But family begins to matter a little bit more. Friends, guardians, mentors, and so if it's appropriate, I think promoting engagement in physical activity, um, even beyond that. I mean, we're health and physical education teachers, and there's relationship health, and there's spiritual health and wellness, and we can promote beyond the physical activity. I think if you're comfortable with that, and if you're knowledgeable enough about that. So I also think that we can implement some content that promotes these things beyond physical activity. But a lot of that relationships are built in physical activity too, so we can really promote some of these alternative objectives or sort of these implicit um, contents, depending on how intentional we are about our instruction. Assessment, you need to ask yourself, what's the role of accountability in this context? Uh, I don't think I would require a heavy dose of accountability just based on the amount of stress, anxiety, potential for sickness in the current context. If I mean, a lot of people are different, and that might be different for you, but you needed to answer that question for yourself. What types of accountability are you requiring, and how are you going to um, hold students accountable, so to speak? That's dependent on what tools you have to appropriately assess students. There's heart rate monitors. Some people might argue that it's reasonable to expect students to engage. Again, you have to kind of decide what's at your um, disposal. Do you have a learning management system that allows you to assess writing or allows students to submit things online? Um, and so all that's dependent on what's available and sort of what your idea of accountability is. And then what is the burden of for you of evaluating? A lot of you, I mean, if you're like me, when I taught physical education, I had 500 some kids. That's going to be a big burden to evaluate assessments. And so it needs to be intentional decision about what you're requiring students to do. Because if you're requiring assessments, it's your obligation and responsibility to provide feedback. And so keep that in mind as you're deciding how you're approaching this um, your instruction and assessment. And then, so with this shifting purpose of physical education and focus sort of on reducing sedentary behavior with increasing engaging physical activity, how does your assessment practices shift? These are big picture questions because they're different for everybody. Everybody's in different contexts. Everybody's got different teaching styles, different relationships with students, etc. So I'm just putting it out there for you guys, you all to decide. Um, but I think they're questions that are relevant. And then how are you going to communicate with students? I think intentionality related to communication is very important. Is there a way you can support parents and guardians during this process? A lot of people are going to be around their families a lot more than they're used to, and there's a lot of different ways that can go. There's a lot of different families are all different, and so we want to be supporting family engagement, physical activity, family support in pursuing sort of healthful, constructive, productive behaviors. So, how can you support parents? A lot of parents probably rely on the schools and daycares for the majority of the day while they're at work. And so, being at home during the school day, the normal when they would normally be at work, is a novel thing. And so, is there a way? Do you have relationships with the community that you can sort of help the parents navigate this interesting experience with the goal of reducing student sedentary behavior, with the goal of helping families and students in particular be physically active? And so how you plan to communicate with students is dependent on a lot of things. Is what your relationship with them is, what your relationship in the community is, how you're sort of what your role is, what tools that you have. Um, so if you have the capacity to have a synchronous sort of real time interaction, is that something reasonable? Can you open up a private YouTube and give your students access and shoot some videos and just communicate through there? Do you have a public Twitter where your students follow you? All those are ways to communicate and model, which is the next thing. Can you model not being sedentary? I'm doing it right now. I'm standing up while I'm giving some instruction. So if you give some instruction, you're on video, show, hey, I like my desk chair, but I'm standing up because I've been sitting on my butt all day. I haven't been. A lot of people do. So say that. Hey, I'm standing up. If you can do your homework for 10 minutes while you're standing up, that's way better than sitting on your butt on the bed. Maybe you say it in a different way than that, but the point is and you model not being sedentary. Can you model being physically active? If I was still working as a physical education teacher, take your cell phone along while you're out for a walk. Hey, I'm walking out here at the local trail. I'm maintaining social distance, but I'm with my family. We're having a great time. The stream water is pretty comfortable, so we're splashing around a little bit in the stream, and then we're gonna head back to the house to make a healthy lunch. I don't know. I told in a different video, I got my bike sitting here on the trainer. Can I say, hey, what's up, everybody? What's your physical activity looking like today? I'm trying to get some minutes on my bike. I'm just watching YouTube videos of the Tour de France. Can you jump on your parents' bike or treadmill, or can you go out and run up and down the stairs more times than your brother or sister or whatever it is? You got to figure that out for yourself. But little short videos might be cool to see how you, as a teacher, are trying to stay sane and trying to stay physically active during this time. I think these videos can also show that demonstrate resilience. Again, we don't really know how this is going to turn out in a couple weeks, but regardless, I think regardless of what we're feeling on the inside, I think portraying a steady, measured, informed, realistically optimistic approach can be reassuring to students, probably especially elementary, but really everyone, all students. So um, when you're communicating with students, we feel like empathizing, sort of, yeah, recognizing the struggle and sort of accepting that is sort of the default, and in some ways I think that's okay, but I think with a level of uncertainty right now, that being resilient and demonstrating perseverance, demonstrating a realistically optimistic approach, um, might be more valuable. I think there's room for disagreement in there, but that's just kind of one thing that I'm throwing out there for people to think about. Um, and then the final thing is intentional reflection. Again, the outcome of this is uncertain, but but so many of you have avoided technology and online learning are facing your fears. As we speak, you're on the computer trying to figure this out. You're on the phone with school support. You're up on Twitter. You're up on Pinterest, whatever it is. You're on Shape America's website. Who would have thought you were doing that? That's awesome. That should be celebrated. Kudos to you, even though you had to, right? You had to do this, but you're doing it and it's going to be fine. Um, and if your experience is terrible, I am sorry for that, and that is not good, but refer to slide 3. Don't let your experience during this insanely crazy time dictate your perception toward technology. Technology use, and by extension, online physical education during a global pandemic is something unique. So please don't let your judgment be clouded. It is allowed, technology and online learning are allowing you to reach your students with quality content, with quality communication, with intentional design. So we need to value that. And regardless of how it goes, sort of step back as your reflection and say, you know what, I was still allowed to do this. It wasn't optimal. It wasn't the best thing ever, but I learned from it and I can move forward. So um, one of the final points is if quality physical education matters, it should matter. And what I mean by that is if we care about quality physical education, it needs to matter in the face-to-face environment, it needs to matter in the flipped or blended learning environment, and it should matter in the online learning environment. Every environment has different students that are geared towards it. But for students where online learning is the best environment for whatever reason, we should celebrate that, we should support that, and we should seek to optimize their experience because quality physical education matters. So through all of this, I think we can come to the place where there is a place for quality physical education, unless the research evidence says it's the worst thing ever, because we don't know that yet. And that's what I'm working on. Okay. I'm trying to keep an open mind with this. I'm not promoting online physical education. I'm just saying the value is there and we need to investigate and define best practice. If it's the worst thing ever, if we find that outcomes are bad, if it doesn't work, like rigorous research shows that it doesn't work, then we need to write it off. But we cannot do that yet. And this is giving us all experience to show the value of it potentially. And the last thing is be still. It's very, very stressful. We take our jobs very, very seriously. There's a lot of stressed out people out there. There's a lot of stressed out students. At the end of the day, it's going to be fine. Okay? You're going to get your content up there. Students are going to engage or not, and the world will continue. And so take it very seriously. Be intentional about your design. Be intentional about your implementation. Be intentional about your assessment. Be intentional about your reflection. But be intentional with the mindset that it will all work out. And there's a lot more going on than just physical education. So we can do the best job that we can. We can put out quality content. We can communicate, and we should communicate with our students positively and resiliently. But if the technology's falling out, if things aren't quite vibing, um, the world will continue turning, and we'll come out of this better. We're already doing that. A lot of you are already approaching fears or avoidances that you never thought you would. So keep up the great work. I'm here to help in any way that I can. Like I said, this is just me trying to help out in any way that I can. Um, a lot of this is unrefined. It will become a little bit clearer with time, but I want to get this out because I care about all of you. I care about quality physical education. Most of all, I care about the kids, and we're doing this for them. And so keep up the great work. Let me know how I can help. Yeah, we're doing it. This is it.